Hello, everyone. Today, I had the distinct privilege to sit down and have a conversation with Morgan Blankenship, who's the director for Dare to Hope Ministries here in Dothan, Alabama. We had a wonderful conversation about how it is that they are deployed to show grace and love and a helpful resource to those who have been victims of human trafficking. Now, in my mind, when I hear human trafficking, I have oftentimes images that are conjured from movies and television, which are extreme things, but often really don't represent the nitty-gritty, the normal and very mundane ways in which this great societal evil permeates around us all the time. Well, Morgan was very informative and very helpful, and helped me stimulate my thinking toward how, as Christians, we can be a greater help and be more loving, be more quick to deploy God's grace toward those who have been victims of these type of societal ills. Anyway, I know she gave me a lot of food for thought. I know she will for you too. So join us on this journey. Anyway, here we go.
All right.
Thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I found out a little bit about Dare to Hope,
Yeah.
and just from that little bit exposure I had from the website, I just knew that this was going to be a fascinating conversation. And so thank you very much for coming in to talk to me.
No, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Now, I'd like to ask you a couple of biographical questions,
Sure.
and then that may stimulate other conversation.
Yeah.
But first things first, please tell us all about Dare to Hope and what you do.
Yeah. So Dare to Hope is a ministry here in Dothan, Alabama.
Okay.
I know a lot of people may or may not, when they think about human trafficking, they may or may not think that it happens here in our own backyard, but it does, unfortunately, every single day. And so our ministry is located here in Dothan.
Okay.
We serve women and teen girls who have been or at critical risk of sexual exploitation, predominantly sex trafficking.
Okay.
So we do that in a variety of ways. First, we believe wholeheartedly in prevention.
Okay.
And so we work very hard with the juvenile justice system. A long time ago, we were able to identify that the most susceptible to sex trafficking were girls, teenage girls within the juvenile justice system and the DHR system. Here in Alabama, it's called DHR.
Okay.
And so we work really, really hard in partnership with the juvenile justice system to educate girls so that they know and understand what sex trafficking truly looks like.
Okay.
A lot of times they think that it's being kidnapped and thrown in the back of a white van because that's what movies display, right?
Exactly.
But unfortunately, it's much more likely.
We all saw the movie Cry Freedom, and that seemed...
Sound of Freedom, yes.
I'm sorry, Sound of Freedom.
That's perfect. The best examples I can give you of the way the media depicts are Taken and Sound of Freedom.
Okay.
Both wonderful movies.
Okay.
Wonderful movies, but for entertainment value rather than the purposes of trying to teach people what the narrative of domestic sex trafficking looks like.
It depicted what was probably more extreme rather than what was more commonplace.
Right. And also much more touched on international sex trafficking.
Okay.
Rather than what it looks like here.
Okay.
It's, in fact, less than 5% of sex trafficking has anything to do with kidnapping.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's much more likely, and we can talk more about that specifically, it's much more likely to be a parent familial trafficking, predominantly mom, or to be a boyfriend or romantic partner. Those are the most likely traffickers in a person's life.
Mom, you're describing like a John Benet Ramsey. I want my child to vicariously live through there.
Much more likely to be so. And when I explain this, it's going to make clear why it's happened so often.
Okay.
So when a family is addicted to drugs and they can't pay for the drugs, typically the child becomes the commodity.
I see. Okay.
And that's sex trafficking. So anytime that a commercial sex act takes place with the presence of force, fraud, or coercion, and that could be pornography, especially the juvenile aspect of it.
I see.
If pornography is produced, if it's even like photos, videos, whatever, if it is an actual commercial sex act, whatever it is for a juvenile, that's immediately considered sex trafficking. You don't have to actually prove force, fraud, or coercion because being a juvenile is an innate vulnerability.
Right, because you assume that consent is not a thing.
Right. For an adult, you have to prove force, fraud, or coercion for it to be considered sex trafficking.
Okay.
And so within the familial aspect of it, if there's addiction present, that's the most gaping vulnerability for children. For adults, again, vulnerability when it comes to addiction, past history of sexual abuse, all of those things. And so definitely those are the two most predominant vulnerabilities on top of homelessness, all of the things. Traffickers exploit using the vulnerability of others. That's why any person can be trafficked, whether it's someone from this side of the tracks or that side of the tracks, or it doesn't matter, socioeconomic class, race, gender, it can happen to anyone of any age. It is definitely, there is a correlation though between vulnerability and the likelihood of sex trafficking. So as vulnerability goes up, so there does the likelihood of sex trafficking.
Okay. So, and again, trying to kind of picture it in my mind, because we all, again,
I understand.
Sound of Freedom, we have this idea visually what's been portrayed.
Yeah.
But I imagine not only is that not the most common aspect of trafficking, but there's probably ways in which it's going to be more specific to the wiregrass.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you see mostly for this area?
It happens quite a bit within the local motels.
Okay.
In and out of motels, again, within the context of family members trafficking their children.
I see.
I know that there was a fairly publicized case recently in Alabama of children being trafficked.
Okay.
But it's also happening to adults. And so in our experience, a lot of the women that are sex trafficking victims as adults, their trafficking experience began when they were children or teenagers. And so we see that just trickle down throughout their life.
Do you find that that creates for them kind of a weird normativity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we talk quite a bit. Actually, that's great that you point that out, because one of the things that we very specifically teach our teenagers within our juvenile justice programming is just because it was normal doesn't mean it was healthy.
Right.
And I use normal in air quotes because we explain to them quite a bit. Most of our women, most of our girls that we work with have experienced fairly significant sexual abuse in their childhood. And so the normalized and unhealthy behavior of sexual abuse, when those are the things that you grow up with every single day, it's not that much different when a trafficker is continuing that same kind of behavior in a person's life. And so breaking that cycle is stepping in and loving unconditionally. That's the most important thing. But also helping to interject exactly what sex trafficking looks like so that it isn't this misconception that it's being, I always use the example with my girls, being snatched at a gas station.
Right, exactly.
That's not what it looks like.
I mean, it's really interesting because once a trusted adult creates a warped sense of pseudo-normativity for a child, that's now kind of shifted a paradigm for them. You don't know how it's going to manifest. I remember years ago, a friend of mine was talking to me about the saintliness of foster parenting. And he says, foster parents, it really takes a person with a particular constitution to be a foster parent, because oftentimes when you welcome a child in your home, you don't know what's been made normative to them before coming into your home. And so oftentimes you're trying to interact with that child in a manner that's normative to you, but you don't know what they've been exposed to up till now. And so, and what's normal to what is normative to them, is that going to clash with what you want to show them as normative and what the other children in the home consider to be normative as well? And I can imagine that this type of scenario, it really messes up the works for a child that is maybe taken out of a dangerous situation, placed into a new environment, and what do they consider normative now?
There's I know we're both familiar with the verse that love covers a multitude of sin.
Right.
And a while back, I was talking to the Lord about that, and I also believe that love covers a multitude of sin done against people. And I think that, yes, I'm sure, especially within foster parenting, I mean, bless people who make the choice, because it truly changes the life of a kid. It truly does. Right. And I know there must be some sort of adjustment period.
Right.
But I also know in my own experience and in the experience of working with women and with girls that it truly is unconditional love and repetitive unconditional love. Being met with grace, all of those things that begin to heal the wounds that have been done to them. And that it's the most miraculous and beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Most people don't appreciate the mystery and magic of redemption. You witness it unfold and people think, well, that's not humanly possible because you can't be explained through any other paradigm. But nevertheless, it seems as though God enjoys redeeming the unlikely.
It's beautiful.
He seems to really enjoy that. And
it makes me grateful, eternally grateful, because when I think about how far I was from him and the redemption that he's extended to me and in my life, and the way that all of the times that I wouldn't be sitting here, to be honest with you, had he not redirected me and had the grace to tell me no and the love to let me pitch my fit, but yet still love me. It's all of those moments. It's, it's why he has convinced me. And I probably, unfortunately, going against my human nature, I had to be convinced that every person was not only capable but worthy of redemption.
Right.
But I've seen what he's done in my life, and I've seen what he's done in the people that he's put before me's lives, and it's beautiful.
Redemption is often hard work.
It is messy.
It's messy and it's hard work. We've been going about this podcast for a couple months now, and our inaugural episode was a student at ACOM was willing to come talk to me about what he had been reading about generational trauma.
Yeah,
and we had a fun conversation about generational trauma. Oftentimes passed down from parent to child in the manner that you're talking about, and yet somehow balancing that with the commandment to honor your father and mother.
Yeah.
And how to put those two together. And we acknowledged, oh my goodness, what a messy process that must be sometimes. Yeah. And yet somehow it's one of those commandments that has this conditional promise with it that, so that it may go well with you in the land that you're going to. Like somehow it's to my benefit to try to honor people that really were screwed up themselves and did their best to screw me up as well.
Yeah.
But
And yet how the Lord blesses the integrity of our heart when we do.
Right.
It's so beautiful. And I think it's one of those otherworldly, he knows so much greater than we do kind of, because it goes very much against like most of the sanctification process.
Right.
It goes so much against what our human nature tells us to do.
Right.
That, our human nature tells us to do wrong against those who've done wrong against us.
Right.
Our spiritual nature and what
No. Do unto others before they do unto you.
That's true. That's true. And so, in the beauty of that and how it sanctifies us, I compare sanctification to genuinely Old Testament slaughter.
Right.
I mean, it's a messy, messy, messy process, and I think I think it's supposed to be. It's our flesh dying.
Right.
And it's messy, but it is. I encourage people. I know the sanctification journey he took me on, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done, and it is the most worth it thing I've ever done.
Right.
And I came out on the other side knowing him in a way that I never would have known him had I not journeyed that out with him. What it says in Psalms, he sets your heart on a pilgrimage.
Right.
And it's beautiful. It's hard.
Oh, I know. Beautiful. Well, and for people in my profession, sometimes you are so passionate about God's grace because you needed it more than most people.
That's right.
That's right. And people say, "Oh my gosh, I'm a sinner saved by grace." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but it's not obvious to me at all that you're worse than me."
That's right.
Let's talk.
That's true.
So you're located here in Dothan, and but so what's the process? You find out about people that have been victims of human trafficking through law enforcement or through some other means.
It various ways.
Okay,
that's part of the excitement of what we do.
No, and then what's the process that unfold from there?
So if we were to identify a victim, whether that was juvenile justice, whether that was that law enforcement or another nonprofit, or someone contacted us, if it is what we consider, if he or she is in need of emergency care, oftentimes if there is drug addiction that has been involved, they're going to need to go to detox. Okay. And so that would typically be 5 to 7 days of detox. And then we assist with that. This is, of course, not something that, if you're not doing this, you probably don't know, but there are very, very few. I think that by my knowledge, and I would love to know if there were more, but there's only one scholarship bed in the entire state of Alabama for a detox bed.
Really?
So most of the people that we work with do not have insurance. Okay. And so if you don't have insurance, you have to pay out of pocket or find a scholarship bed. And the scholarship bed costs $500.
Okay.
It normally costs thousands of dollars for 5 to 7 days of detox. And so depending on the drug, depending on whether it's alcohol, you have a
scholarship bed. Is that someplace that's a medical facility? That's
certain drugs, certain alcohol,
Right.
certain things require medical detox. And so in order to safely come off of those things, you would need to go through medical detox.
I had a friend years ago that really was very specific about his language because we were talking about pornography addiction, and he didn't like the term pornography addiction. And he says his phrase was, and he's someone who had recovered from alcoholism, and so he didn't like the term pornography addiction. He preferred the term pornography compulsion. And I'm not saying I'm debating it, but his phrase was he liked to differentiate that which required medical personnel to detox from. And typically that's what you would ascribe addiction to, that, because the withdrawal effects can be quite dangerous.
Yeah. Yes. Particularly, I was very interested to learn that very much so with alcohol.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, very much so. There are certain aspects of like methamphetamines, they will not necessarily accept you at a detox bed.
Really?
And so I would question the compulsion versus addiction, because technically they won't accept you for meth.
Really? Wow.
For methamphetamine addiction, at a detox. But you don't technically need medical detox, but you still need intervention. And so I would say that would be an interesting discussion between a compulsion and an addiction.
Right, exactly. And I appreciate his desire to be very technical and with your language like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because pornography is such a huge part of the way that it drives demand of sex trafficking. So it's interesting.
Well, it's a dopamine addiction, basically.
Yes.
Someone's chasing dopamine, and that's why they go through those emotional highs and lows, because you come down hard, from that high, and then eventually the shame of it causes you to want to chase that dopamine again, to try to
just like drugs,
anesthetize the pain of your shame.
That's
so
right.
that's why it's a downward spiral.
Yeah, when we do our trainings for teenagers, we touch on that, and we talk about how pornography, they did brain scans of someone who's addicted to pornography and someone who is addicted to cocaine, and the brain scans look identical.
Interesting. Okay.
Because the same portion of your brain, the pleasure center of your brain, the same portion that becomes addicted to drugs is the same portion that becomes addicted in the exact way that you're explaining to pornography. So.
Well, and I know that for many, and someone, I will tell you that in my past, that's among my struggles as well. And for that reason, by God's grace, I stay clear of other addictions, because I just know, as an addictive personality, don't touch on. It
takes over. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It does. Yeah. Right. Compulsive or addictive, aspects of your constitution suddenly stay in their lane.
Yeah.
And so I want to be cautious about what it is that you could sample. And when you see people who have suffered from different drugs addictions, alcohol addictions, gambling addictions, things like this, it can be quite a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm interested in what you're saying about that, because you do counseling for young men about this?
No. But we oftentimes, especially when we did outreach, we would encounter buyers. And they were addicted to pornography.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a unifying trait. A lot of the sexual abuse and things that our girls have faced has been, you can draw it back to their perpetrators were addicted to pornography. That's how it begins for a lot of perpetrators. And I think when we do speak in front of mixed genders, we train a lot of teenage girls, and occasionally we're in mixed gendered settings with teenagers, but we always touch on it because it is such a pervasive thing now. Right. You can pick up your phone and it's there. You can turn the TV on. Unfortunately, it's there.
It was an issue pre-internet. And so I can only imagine how.
And now the anonymity of it, and and they are attempting to change some of the laws so that it removes the anonymity, so that you do have to register, or you do have to enter in some kind of information, and whether or not that's going to stop people, I don't know, but they are trying to regulate it in some way. There is a huge amount of sex trafficking that takes place within the pornography and adult film industry.
I heard Pornhub described as the most visible and largest crime scene on the internet.
Yes. Yeah.
Because of just the content that's created. Yeah. Minors, coercion, so
without
forth. Without consent, and so forth.
Yeah, all the things, all of it. Yeah, I look forward to the day where there is no such thing as Pornhub.
Right. So I don't know how you eradicate that entirely, because we have images carved into granite walls dating back to the ancient time, right? But I
think the glorification of it is the problem,
right?
And I think it's that we're so desensitized to it that whether it's movies, television, advertising, everything is so dependent upon sexualized culture. that it becomes an issue because we are desensitized to it.
Well, that's one of the easiest ways to become a celebrity in our fame addicted culture now.
Yeah.
And
there's such
that's your Kardashian method.
And there's such a downside. There's such a I like to say that the enemy can create a tsunami without you even noticing because he uses a dropper.
Right? Oh, gosh.
And over time, a dropper can be used to create a tsunami because you're not paying attention. And I think that's part of the issue is we've become so desensitized that we're now beginning to look up and to realize there's a tsunami coming.
Right.
Or the wave is crashing, and that now what do we do? And we oftentimes, in my experience, turn and point the fingers at teenage girls and say, how dare you? Or, but in reality, we've created the kind of culture that sexualized them long before they were even born.
Right. And it is difficult to kind of produce a chicken egg type of causal, cause and effect relationship because there's always been within a bounded, kind of sexual marketplace, there's always been means by which people make themselves stand out as being more attractive to the opposite sex. Guys lift weights and they do the masculine things to try to be attractive. Well, then there would be the female corresponding opposite as well. And so I don't know. But nevertheless, when the culture changes, those habits change. And how do males make themselves stand out and how do females make themselves stand out? I don't know what the solution to that is. But in the internet age, in the Instagram age, that's
social media.
Right.
We do a lot of training with our groups of girls on social media, and I teach them. It would be unwise of me to expect them to delete their social media because we live in such an interconnected world. I think it would be naive of me to believe that our teenagers are not going to have social media. But what I do believe is that we can teach them to be wise on it.
Right.
And we can teach them what grooming and trafficking, how it begins on social media. Yeah. I think the last statistic I've seen is 60% of grooming for sexual exploitation begins online.
Really?
And so much of those things, I joke and tell them I could tell you 100% and then say, hey, who's going to go home and delete their social media now? And it's like crickets,
exactly.
Because it would be naive for me to believe that. But what I do hope is that we can teach them to be wise on it, to not be afraid of it. I don't want parents to be afraid of it. It's a part of our world.
Exactly.
It's going to be a part of our world, but to know how to navigate it.
I really despise social media myself, but in like manner that I despise bad traffic. I mean, I moved up here from Central Florida, and it's so funny because I oftentimes tell people, they'll say, "Well, they'll say, boy, traffic was really bad today in Dothan." Okay, if you say so.
You've seen nothing.
I mean, we would have to drive past the Disney attractions on the way to work sometimes, and it's
my gosh,
you don't know bad traffic.
That's right.
And so I may dislike social media. I may think the internet's really has enabled our depravity in ways that the world had never known before. However, I also hate bad, gridlock traffic. I still have to drive on the roads to get from one place to another. Yeah. And so I can decry social media and Instagram and X and all these things and say how much they've ill-served humanity. And yet, for the church's sake, I'm using all these things to try to kind of like be
network,
get exposure out into the world. Yeah. And so you're right. It is having to drive on the roads the cultural roads that are the way they're striped.
Yeah. I think unfortunately it does have a tendency to magnify or exacerbate things. But in the same way, it also it's meant to be a tool. I think it's meant to be a tool that we can use. I think that because of our own human nature, it tends to exacerbate or to magnify our weaknesses in a lot of ways.
There is a manner in which we interact online that we would never in person.
I agree.
And Instagram is image driven, although It is supposedly image driven, but yet I'm constantly told, "Hey, there's these tools you could be using to market the church on Instagram that I'm not using." I'm like, I'm not willing to learn all those tools. I don't want to become good at that.
Yeah.
But Instagram is a more visual medium. Facebook is the thing that we all force the grandparents to get on so we can see the kids, pictures of the grandkids. And then X is just the Wild West.
I'm impressed you call it X. I still call it Twitter.
Right.
I can't help myself. I'm like, oh yeah, I think it changed.
I know. Well, but so those things are all funky and weird, and yet at the same time, I have to somehow use those or have a rudimentary understanding of how those work, because otherwise I have no ability to dialogue with the generation coming after me.
It's the new church bulletin.
Oh gosh. Well, it's funny. Instagram is an image-driven medium, and yet, but people will put something on the internet. They would never. They'll maybe not to just pick on young ladies, but it's image-driven, right? So that's where a lot of their. I hate to be crass, but they're able to market themselves as in their market value in the social network. They're able to place themselves on Instagram, and oftentimes in a way that they would not dress coming to the rest of their social network. They're like, just because no, but on Instagram it's fine. Or guys, they manifest their vices manifest maybe more on X, the way they're going to post something, that comment that you will not say to a man's face because you're concerned about that he will punch you for that.
The repercussion,
right?
The anonymity has helpful.
It's produced. It does. The internet world does produce behaviors that we will not do face to face. We won't have the normal human interaction would serve as some sort of a mitigating factor from certain vices that we are prone to. I myself lament that oftentimes I come from a tradition that requires people personally be in the same space for worship, because the sacraments can't be administered through online. And so, but yet I do see many, in many cases, people, having these worship experiences or Christian experiences through the internet or online. And my thought is, boy, it seems like this is supposed to be a contact sport. We're supposed to be in each other's space, in each other's presence for this. But that's the main thing. It's like, if I wouldn't say it to someone's face, don't say it online. I definitely
feel, just as you were saying that, I definitely feel that it has a way of revealing the lack of healing that we have. Because no matter what it is that we're reaching for, whether it is that attention or whether it's the pride or whatever it is that we're grasping for, it does have a way, social media does have a way of blocking the repercussions of that, like you're saying,
through anonymity, Right.
But I think that both of those examples, whether male, female, whatever the situation is, it has a tendency to reveal how unhealed we are.
Right.
What we're grasping for. I tell my girls all the time, when you find who you are in the Lord, when you know who He is, when you know what He has said about you, it changes the way that you chase after things, whatever that is, whoever that is.
Right. It
changes the way that you feel like you have to reach for things to be your portion and your prize, like He promises that He will be. It changes your very nature.
I see.
And I think that it really does. It reveals it probably more so than anything now.
Right.
No.
Well, because it starts from the inside and works its way out. Yeah. I mean, Jesus is constantly talking about how various bits of different behaviors began as a heart issue.
Yeah.
You have heard it said of old, you will not do X, but I tell you that if it started in your heart, you already have plenty to confess.
Yeah.
So as much as you're willing, would you be willing to kind of share how your story, how you came to the point where you would be your executive director for
incoming? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're making that transition now.
Oh, really? Okay, wonderful. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So, but what led up to this part? I mean, and your passion for this?
So I I grew up in Headland, Alabama, which is just north of here.
Right.
Small town. I grew up on a peanut farm, and my family, incredibly loving, very supportive, very, very much so taught my brother and I the value of people. And I think that truly, if I look back, I think that's really where it began, was just being taught that there's innate value in every person.
Okay.
And seeing the way that particularly my mom and my grandmother loved people very, very well. I think that planted the seeds for what I do now. I graduated from high school, went to the University of South Alabama, and I had every intention of going to law school and study political science. And from there, I came to a point, and this goes back to the Lord's grace for me. I came to a point where I'd done international missions, fell in love with doing ministry, and I came to a place where I'd been offered an opportunity to do a gap year, to take a gap year and to spend a year abroad so that and go minister. I'd spent 2 summers in Peru, in Lima, Peru. And so I'd been given the opportunity to go do that for an entire year. And so I jumped at it. Like I was ecstatic. And so as the Lord, it was his will, it fell completely apart. And I was devastated. And back then I was very much so, I was about to graduate from college and I did not have a plan. And if you knew me back then, you would know that was very difficult for me, that I didn't know what direction I was going in. It's not that I needed the A to B to C to, it was that I had no direction. I had no idea what's coming, and that made me very uncomfortable.
When we're young, we can't imagine all of the various different ways in which our personality and skills could be deployed.
That's right. But even now, sitting here today, when I look back, he planted the seeds of what I do beginning. I remember distinctly when I was 12 years old. And so watching how he did that, and me, unfortunately, I wish I could be super Christian, and I've said that I'd handled that really well along the way. That's what I mean when I say his grace. I'm here today because of his grace. I'm here today because I've been in Deuteronomy, and he has really like seared this word remembrance in my heart. And I've been rereading Deuteronomy lately, and that book means a lot to me. The resounding theme is, hey, remember. Right. Hey, remember what I've done. Remember that I brought you out of slavery. Remember that I brought you out of bondage. Remember that I humbled you and fed you with manna. Like that stuck out to me in the last week. And that's, I feel like, what my journey has been. He humbled me and he fed me with manna. And I, as much flack as I give the Israelites, I could be like them sometimes.
Oh gosh, they're just a proxy for the rest of us.
They are.
I mean, seriously. I mean, they're just about, and I pay attention to political speak now and what's going on with cultural trends. I'm probably a little bit more tuned into cultural trends and hot buttons than a priest should be. And but the anti-Semitism that kind of pops up in popular rhetoric nowadays, I oftentimes want to say, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, because just about anything you read from the Bible of the Israelite nation or first century Jews who were were yelling crucify Christ, they're just a proxy for the rest of us.
They are.
They're just a localized ethnos, which is a stand-in for the instincts we all have, as though I would do anything different the time. That's right. And so, listening to what you're saying, it reminds me of a term. It came out when I was teaching. I still teach for the University of Houston class online, and it's really part of the religious studies program. And I teach Bible and modern science. And there's an old world term that has fallen out of favor. I'd really like to bring it back, and it's actually in our U.S. Declaration of Independence. The word is providence. And providence is kind of not used as much anymore, and that's too bad, because providence I define as divine intervention through seemingly natural processes to achieve overtly redemptive results. And so it's like the untrained eye would look at that and just see it as the unfolding of life and not really see what everyone else sees. But those who have eyes to see and ears to hear look back over their life and go, are you crazy? Of course God was arranging all that during this time.
Of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. When in that moment, I distinctly remember where I sat as I cried that day that I found that out. I remember the person I was talking to, the person who was consoling me. And I believe the Lord has helped me maintain such a specific memory, because what happened after that. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I go to law school? Do I go to seminary? What do I do? And I was kind of in between these two things and just trying to figure out and navigate what in the world am I going to do. So I went to tour a seminary. I went to New Orleans Theological Seminary, and it's a beautiful campus. And my campus minister, shout out to Shannon Hughes.
New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, is it still there?
It
I
is.
thought Katrina. I thought Katrina took it out.
I think it had some damage, maybe, but it's still there.
Oh, wonderful! It was a beautiful campus. I was there once for a conference.
Beautiful, and I went there. And if you've been there, then that they have these beautiful porches, big white columns with rocking chairs and things. I got there, and it's a wonderful school, wonderful campus, and I cried myself to sleep the first night of my orientation, or of the introductory student.
Really?
Yes, I did. Because if you've ever been somewhere and you think you're going into it, and then you get there and you become wholeheartedly convinced. I know that it was the Holy Spirit. Wholeheartedly convinced. This is not where I'm supposed to be. And I became so keenly aware that this is not it. This is not where I'm supposed to be. Cried myself to sleep. Again, Shannon Hughes, bless her. She was like, it's okay. Let's eat breakfast in the morning, then we'll go home. So after breakfast that morning, I was still just in such a despondent place. I was sitting on one of those white rocking chairs on one of those beautiful porches. And I was like, Lord, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And the most clearly I have ever heard the Lord up until that point. He said, why don't you go ask John and Dolores at Light of the Village if they're hiring? And that was a ministry where I had been leading to a group of college students to go volunteer once a week for a couple of years. And I went, and they hired me almost on the spot. And I spent a gap year there and then stayed there 2 more years because the Lord captivated my heart with ministry. And I fell completely in love with it. If I had gone abroad, I never would have met my daughter. I adopted my daughter while I was there. And I remember that's why I believe he has that so specific in my mind that I was like, why didn't this work out? And it was because he had exceedingly and abundantly more than I could think to have asked of him. I met my daughter. I fell in love with ministry. And then the rest of my life, after my daughter, I adopted my daughter. One of my friends passed away from a drug overdose, and I adopted her daughter as my daughter. And so
that's a redemption story.
Yeah, she's the joy of my life, the joy of my life. And I would have missed it had I had my way. If he didn't love me enough to tell me no, I wouldn't have had it. And that is it's such a lesson to me. And I remind myself of it often because she's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And I could have missed it. Okay. And so after we moved back home, I worked in government for a while. I worked for the Senate and the House of Representatives here in the local offices for a while. Okay. And then we moved to New Jersey for a ministry opportunity. And when we moved back, I stepped into a job with Mark and Susan Anderson at Wired. Okay. So Mark and Susan started Wired Ministries, which is a movement of youth, essentially. They are encouraging youth to not just live for 1 week during the summer camp for the Lord, but to know that service is a part of your life every single day. It's a beautiful thing that just out of obedience that they've done for our community. It's wonderful. They hired me, and that catapulted me into meeting the founder of Dare to Hope, where I now work. And I fell completely in love with working with women and teen girls. I'm incredibly passionate because I believe that the Lord can take the brokenness of our lives and he can make us whole again. And I love that I get to get up every day and I don't feel like I'm going to work at all. I feel alive. I don't know how to explain it to people who've never experienced that before, but I encourage particularly college students or students who are just trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life. Right. I tell them, and I don't take it for granted, but I tell them there's when you are walking in the purpose for which he created you, it's waking up every day and feeling completely alive. that you get to do that. And walking in your gifting, it's the most fulfilling and beautiful thing I've ever experienced.
Well, we really broke trust with an entire generation of college students in that, once upon a time, we had students that were head off, and they would either completing college and then do a year in the Peace Corps or some other thing, in between high school and college or so forth. But a lot of that youthful zeal, that messianic complex, I want to save the world. I want to have this big effect. A lot of a lot of the climate activism and a lot of the political activism comes from that developmental period where all that energy, what I do with it, I want to have this big effect. And once upon a time, we used to encourage those young people toward different acts of service. And I mean, there are religious traditions that aren't necessarily mine, but they still seem to have a good understanding of this.
Encourage that initial service.
Exactly right. And so, and in many ways, some of the, like in North American Christianity, kind of fell short of that in a sense by making, that week-long short-term mission trip that we did for our youth group that was somehow adequate. And that wasn't adequately expressing or helping them give themselves over to service and use all that energy and youth and that means of catching a vision for their life. That wasn't adequate for that, and so they needed more, and we didn't keep up with that.
Yeah,
and so
I can say it was those mission trips, those experiences. While I don't think that, especially short-term missions, you can have an over a long period of time, especially if you're working in the same communities and things, you can have a huge impact.
Right.
But as far as me providing a service for 1 week, I mean, the impact that I received from those things was way greater than anything that I could have given in terms of the spiritual experience and exactly what you're describing. And then having been able to do that for months on end and then to live a life that looks like that, it's transformative.
Well, short-term missions came under a lot of critique for that very reason.
Yes, and I understand that.
Because they would say, okay, wherever you're sending these youth, the youth are getting a lot out of it.
They are
way
getting a lot
more
out of
than the people
than
that
the
you're
community. Yeah.
Exactly right.
No.
In fact, it's something of a drain for them. And so we're like, we're not here to be your kids' summer camp experience.
Right. No, I agree to both. To both.
But we do still have a obligation to our youth to say, okay, you're in that developmental stage where this is that you need to see what's out there. You need to hear, you need to expend a lot of the energy on service opportunities. Understand that there's more than just you, and what is the way in which the church can be helping direct them.
Well, and to fan the flame of that passion rather than stomp it out. Right. I mean, I do think that in some ways we've become so practical that we tend to stomp out that passionate idealism that drives people toward, I'm going to devote my life. I'm going to kill the cow and burn the plow, and I'm going to devote my life to this. I think that that's not something that a lot of times, I don't think that that's something that is oftentimes heralded when it's personal to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so beautiful when you see other people doing that. Right. But when the expectation falls to me to do that, that's scary. Or when it's my child, if my child comes to me and says, hey, this is what I want to do, I'm like, well, that's not practical. Right. There's a lot of things in the gospel that were not technically practical. They were miraculous and they were beautiful, and they came with the expectation that faith was a requirement it was a prerequisite. And so I wish that we fan that flame a little bit more. I know that because that happened in my life, I'm sitting here.
Somewhere along the line, we became insufficiently adventurous with our younger generation, and just wanting them to get a good job, keep their nose down, crank out some grandkids for me while you're at it if you could, and but not looking at them saying, no, this is exactly the time where you need to you need to explore what's out there. And really, you're not going to find yourself by trying to.
No.
You're going to find yourself by giving up yourself and giving up yourself for service. And then the mystery of God's providence, that's when he basically reveals to you, hey, this is your purpose because you weren't just navel gazing the whole time. You actually found yourself because you were looking for me, not you.
That's right. Yeah, because we're not the most important thing.
Right? I know.
I know it was a newsflash to me, but I'm not the most important thing. So I think that's the beauty of it. My spiritual mentor, the founder of our ministry, Gia Hughes, wonderful. I mean, it just has spiritually mothered me in a way that I could do an entire podcast because it's been transformative for my life. But what she always talks about is how service and ministry is not meant to be service and ministry in and of itself. It's meant to just purely be the overflow of your heart.
Right.
I'm the woman at the well, and he transformed my life, and I can't help but run back and tell.
Yeah.
I can't help but to teach Bible study to these girls because I know who he is. It's that overflow. It's not because I'm trying to build a ministry. It's not because I'm trying to make my name known. It's because I love him so much. I want his name to be known. We tell our girls all the time, if you don't remember my name, it's okay.
Right.
If you remember his name and you carry his spirit and you know that he is a tangible and alive presence in your life, that's what matters.
Well, I really appreciate you coming. Just one more question, if I could. We've got many who are listening to this in the Wiregrass area. Now I'm actually having to start having some there outside of this area with other churches and so forth. And if you could just take a couple of seconds to talk about what are some of the ways in which churches could be more helpful to not just, you have this local ministry, but this is a concern that any church and in the United States, anyone who hears this what's their way of kind of having greater awareness? What's their resources that they can, what are some ways in which, what's an action plan for people that hear this?
So I would say first and foremost, being intentional about knowing what sex trafficking actually looks like, not relying upon media or television, going to websites where, whether it's our website or groups like Exodus Cry or Frontline Response or Wonderful Well House, any website, it may be different in certain areas, but beautiful ministries or beautiful nonprofits that are trying to get the information out about what sex trafficking looks like in our communities. It is happening. It is happening in your backyard. It's happening. A good rule of thumb is that if there's drug trafficking in your community, there's also sex trafficking. And any room I've ever been in, and I've asked the question, can anybody name a community that isn't touched by drugs at this point? There isn't one. I literally cannot think of one. And so that means that it's at our back door. It's happening in our church youth groups, or it's happened to someone at our child's school, or to the cousin that we have that's struggled with drug addiction. Whatever it is, it's more pervasive than we realize. And so just being aware and being educated, if you ever encounter an issue where you suspect that sex trafficking might be occurring, we've always been told law enforcement would rather you call than not call. They're willing to walk out the steps to find out if that's what it is. If it's an emergency situation, immediately just call. If you think that person's life is in danger, call. Call, do not hesitate. There is a national hotline. So for everybody who may not live here, there is a national hotline where you can call, and they will connect the victim of sex trafficking with local services. And so that's an immediate way for people to be able to be connected with services if they want them. From there, it's investing. One of the ways that I was saying earlier was one of the ways that we try to prevent sex trafficking is to really lean into vulnerable communities to provide services. So one of the things that we do, we partner with the juvenile justice system. We provide wraparound services from pre-diversion to girls on juvenile probation to one-on-one mentorship with girls living in group homes, girls living in that are currently in the lockup facility. We teach Bible study. We do mentorship in an effort to educate. If they've already been trafficked, about 20% of girls in juvenile justice have already been trafficked. And so identifying them, helping provide very specific trauma-informed services to them, getting them help through trust-based relationships. That's the key to everything that we do. We also run and I'm sure in every community, or in every, at least one in every state, I would think, there would be organizations that help to house sex trafficking victims, survivors, so that they can have a transitional period where they can reestablish life. One of the things that the way we explain what we do we help walk people from vulnerability to stability.
Okay.
And so because traffickers prey upon vulnerability, it makes sense to attack vulnerability in the lives of those we serve to help establish them in a way that the vulnerability is lessened, whether that's educationally, mental and emotional health, spiritually,
Right.
emboldening them in ways that they already have it.
Predators know where the honey's good.
Predators know where to lurk. Yeah.
Where the hunting is good. Exactly.
know.
I mean, it's one thing. Years ago, one of my pre-ministry careers was teaching martial arts, and we were to have like an anti-rape class. And one of the things we talked about in that was all the women in the class. You talk about what was it to be a good mark, a good mark versus a bad mark. Because and people like that's a new terminology to them, but I'm like, no, these are terms that you use from the perspective of the predator. For the predator, a good mark is one that is, you think of it, lines of the Serengeti. The good mark is where I can get my prey with the least amount of effort, that they won't fight me too much, and it takes less energy to actually keep that and protect the kill as opposed to anyone else who wants to come. So I'm trying to maximize my payoff and minimize my effort. That's a good mark. So it's the weak and slow gazelle, right? A bad mark is the one that's too much effort, that's too much work. I cannot acquire the prey, I can't keep it. And so again, all of those predatory instincts that you see from any given nature channel, well, they apply to the human predator. And so once you put yourself in that mindset, you realize, okay, actually my habits going to and from work, my habits of where I park my car every time, the habits of what I do around my house, these all make me a good mark. Changing any one of those things make me more effort to the predator than they want to expend. And so this idea of taking someone from a good mark to a bad mark, being from the predator's perspective, and you're talking about the vulnerable being a good mark, not due to no fault of their own, but they're just in that arena where the hunting's good. And so you move them to a place where they're a bad mark because only Jesus is going to change the heart of the predator. All you can do is help the person move from whether they've been a good mark to a bad mark.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately it does have to be the Lord that changes the heart of a predator.
Right.
We've dealt with a lot of people who have very little limits to what they'll do to another person.
Right.
And seen things and heard things and witnessed things that I know what evil looks like.
Right.
And sometimes it comes in the form of a predator, and they're very unbiased in how they will attempt to get what they want and exploit. And I think that the best thing that we as a ministry can do, and people can do, the church can do, is to make an intentional movement toward loving every person that's put before them really, really well.
Well, there's practical aspects to that too.
Yeah.
I mean, how all of our churches are putting people through background checks, and how
That's
we
right.
have all
Yeah.
these different how we put things in place to protect our children.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes churches are sometimes a target-rich environment for the predator.
Well, there's built-in connectivity, built-in vulnerability, built-in all of those things. Yes, and so it really is. Yes, it's imperative for any arena, but particularly
churches, because not only does an inherent trust factor place people at make for a target-rich environment for the predator, but also, and I've seen this myself, where especially in churches can be highly scandal averse. And so when it's your youth person, it's your youth volunteer, or it's that person or that donor or whatever goes on, you really want to keep it quiet and move, kind of keep things under the rug, because all of a sudden now, if you're scandal averse, you can't handle a scandal that could possibly see anyone leaving your enterprise, your church, your private school, whatever. And so I'm pretty sensitive to this, because I mean, my career in ministry has exposed me to a number of different scenarios where I saw you're just not helping. I mean, because of how the processes were put in place, that institution is not helping to sift out the predators. They keep it a target-rich environment because that person relies on secrecy. That person relies on your scandal aversion, and they rely very much on the trust that doesn't want to be left. And you don't want people to lose trust. You don't want people suspicious. Why does everyone have to go through a background check? I thought we were all family here, and they very much rely on that type of scenario in order to maintain that depraved side of themselves that needs redemption.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
You're preaching to the choir. No, I agree. I think that anytime something like that happens, anytime that there is a situation where abuse has occurred, the response has to be victim-centered. It has to be.
Right.
It has to be the priority, even if that means revealing that the process was imperfect, even if that means that revealing that there was a wolf in your midst.
Right.
I think that it has to be victim-centered. It has to be reactive to, we don't ever want this to happen again.
Right.
More concern should be placed upon protection than it should be aversion to scandal, as you said.
Well, that victim is someone who is looking to you as a proxy to God's grace.
Yeah.
And their view of God's protection will be their view of how God looks after them.
Yes.
will be strengthened or handicapped by your response.
You just opened up a whole thing. One of the most difficult things for victims is when they've been victimized at the hands of someone who proclaimed the Lord.
Yeah.
Because it's not just, and this is not to minimize anything, it is a physical violation as well as a spiritual violation.
Well, right. I mean, it's a metaphysical violation.
And it damages. It sometimes damages the way that they see the Lord. And what a scheme of the enemy to try to divide them from the only healer. And so it's one of the most damaging scenarios that I've witnessed.
Right.
When those two things have been intermingled, that it's a person who should have been trusted, who proclaimed the name of the Lord, and yet took advantage of all of those things. Because you're exactly right. It becomes, this person didn't just do this to me, God did this to me.
Right. And unfortunately, I feel like in some ways we, particularly in church settings, we really don't talk about that as much as we should.
We talk about that almost every day. It's honestly the work we do. A huge chunk of what we do, we undo the damage as much as we can by living by example in front of them, loving well, and pointing them consistently to the one who can heal them. Right. I remember there used to be 2 strip clubs in our area, and both of them have since closed.
Okay.
But for a long period of time, I think for 10 years, Gia started doing club ministry here. And one of the things that happened while I joined in after several years of her having done it, and one of the things that we learned, though, number one, those girls they're precious. Precious. They've been taught many times that God hates them, which is not true.
Right.
We got there one day and we went in the back room and have food and gifts and just, we loved them. And we would hang out with them and they were like, oh my gosh, we're so glad you guys are here. Let me tell you what happened. And this was like a Thursday, and one of the days prior, maybe the Wednesday or the Tuesday, I don't, but in the couple days prior, a church had picketed them and had obscenities yelled at them. They were yelling at them and filming them and violating their personal space and throwing things and doing all of the things. And I thought it was an incredible blessing that we got to come the very next day and to minister to them as Jesus would minister to them.
I grew up in a picketing church,
it spoke volumes, I believe, because it was. Number one, the first thing I did was apologize to them and say, I'm so sorry that happened. This is who Jesus is. you displaying that.
I know. And it's tough because I grew up in a church that liked to picket, and that was their thing. And, just what the business that they thought was very, the deviant thing in town. And so they're going to picket that. And that's what they did. But I also learned specifically in this paradigm of what I refer to as gospel-free zones. Gospel-free zones are the places where good Christians don't go. And in essence, that creates a safe space for how the devil wants to destroy anybody's life. And I'm of the mind that the devil gets no safe space. I'm sorry.
I agree.
He just doesn't. He does not deserve it.
We give him no ground.
He doesn't get to have a safe space.
When I first started doing outreach, we would go all kinds of places to do outreach, and it was one of the most wonderful things to get to see the Lord do beautiful things, in the parking lots of motels and back rooms at strip clubs. And I've seen the Lord do miraculous things. But Gia always referred to it as taking back ground.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Now, admittedly, there are some places that are unwise for me to go.
Yeah.
Okay. But there is no place, I think, that no Christian should go.
Right.
And so I've spent many years as a chaplain for fire departments. And so I was on a lot of calls. And so I'm on a lot of homes and a lot of motor vehicle accidents, a lot of fires. I'd ride with my crew in many ways. It was never my nature to sit back and go, well, when you need to pray about something, come talk to me. I'm like, how much can I be with you?
Right.
My confessional half the time was like, the back seat of the apparatus as we're heading to a fire. Chaplain, I need to talk to you. I'm like, while he's putting on his marker gear. But nevertheless, there was a lot of time spent in that arena, and there was just a lot of ugly. A lot of ugly going on in many cases, either, destruction or overdose or things going on. Yeah. Just a lot of ways in which just the world doesn't work like it's supposed to. And yet these men and women are deployed into this arena to be God's rescue in a sense into the ugly. They're having to deal with the ugly all the time. And I was with them going, I was always frustrated, like, we need more of the gospel, the more Christian character, more Christian love in these unpleasant places. And places like where you're talking about, where you go. These are people that you're the only Jesus they're ever going to know. They would never find out about Christ other than you walk into there where they're going, are you with the same people that picketed me yesterday?
No. It's funny that you'd say that. We're really big on doing life with our girls, and which means that when we have girls from 6 and 7 years ago, like, we continue to walk out life. If she's in trouble or she's in need or she just needs somebody to, we hopped in the car a few weeks ago and drove hours just to see her, and she was like, "Why?" She's like, "Why'd y'all come to town? What do y'all got to do down here?" And we were like, we just came to see you. And she was like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, we literally just came to see you." And she was talking to somebody on the phone at one point, and she told him, she was like, "I didn't know nothing about Jesus except what they taught me." And the weight of that, the privilege of that, but the weight of that is just, but that's who we are. That's what Christians are. It's not because I'm in ministry. It's not because I'm this or that. That's what we are supposed to be as ambassadors of Christ. That's who we are, to literally carry his presence. That's it.
It reminds me that it's that scene out of the book of Acts when, the sheet lowers down to Peter and he says, take and eat all this in this vision. He's like, I don't eat anything unclean. And what God's called, is calling unclean, you don't call unclean. And the lesson I got from that from class years ago was it seemed as though God was more concerned about the clean making the unclean clean than he was about the unclean making the clean unclean.
That's right.
It's like you're more worried about how they're contagious upon you. Why aren't you worried about how contagious you're supposed to be to them?
Well, and that was not at all, like, if you read the gospel, if you read, golly,
right.
I don't know how you can read the life of Jesus and come to any other conclusion.
Yeah, where's I don't get timidity out of this at all.
No, or when the woman knelt and the Pharisees condemned her and she was washing his feet.
Right.
And they were like, if he knew who she was, he wouldn't allow her to touch him. And Jesus is like, I came here and you didn't offer me
Right.
water to wash. You didn't anoint my head with oil, and
Right.
that he's given me everything, and in that, his character doesn't shift and
No.
change. That's who he is throughout the gospel. And oh my gosh,
Right.
and I think that our call is quite literally to be that every day for somebody.
Exactly.
And how beautiful.
Well, it's the only adventure in town. I mean, it's the only game in town in terms of where you go, no. I'm deployed out into this thing where, this world where I have no idea what's going to happen, but I know that, I'm deployed by the one who has one goal in mind, as the redemption of everybody.
Yeah.
And so,
And that he can simultaneously hold the thought of everyone seeing redemption while being willing to wholeheartedly pursue the one.
right.
I mean, wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I think it goes back to that whole concept that I talked about at the beginning, which is that to be taught that every person has innate value.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's distinctly biblical.
Right.
Every person has value, and to be willing to go to the ends of the earth for that. And that circles back to redemption. Thank you that you redeemed me, Lord.
Well, thank you so much for
You're
coming,
very
and I
welcome.
just enjoyed this very much. Thank
You're
you.
very
I appreciate it.
welcome. You're welcome.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like and subscribe, and we will keep it up.